Good day, I'm Oskar Sherlief, and these are the latest news from Kazakhstan. Members of the European Parliament established a number of non-compliances of Kazakhstan sharing the OSCE with EU standards. Constitution guarded securely as no more amendments will be allowed after the last one regarding the leader of nation law adoption. Former Warrant Office of Kazakh military forces threatened to self-immolation herself as authorities evict her from the premise she lives in. The Kazakh Supreme Court had declined the appeal of the Western Kazakhstan regional weekly Uralskaya Nedelya. The Ural Court had previously obliged the newspaper to pay the Tengiz-Neftistroy joint stock company compensation in amount of $135,000. Surprisingly, the Supreme Court had not even inquired the case before rejecting to review it. Now the journalists intend to seek justice abroad through the international human rights organizations. The newspaper was sued for publishing a material in which stated that Tengiz-Neftistroy brought the materials in the construction site and launched the field camp way before the tender for Jimpiti-Karatobe crude oil line construction was launched.
The thing is that this lawsuit pursues the interests of not only our staff. I'm afraid this will serve a precedent for other media outlets in Kazakhstan. It will become a norm to lodge court sanctions on astronomical sums which we simply can't pay, and thus eventually would have to be completely disappear from the market.
Perhaps colleagues from Ural Weekly can discuss the situation with a member of the EU Parliament, Joe Higgins, who met with journalists in Shymkent. He came there to personally observe how the human rights are observed in southern Kazakhstan. Foreign politician is going to present an alternative report to his colleagues in Europe on the human rights situation and is convinced that the country chairing the OSCE doesn't really comply with organization standards.
The member of the European Parliament, Joe Higgins, has given an interview in the largest TV station of the southern Kazakhstan. He admitted that he learned more about the persecution of independent press and pressure on free-thinking society. He thinks that this is an alarm bell for the current authorities.
Get back to the authorities in the European Parliament, and we hope that our visit will in some way assist and support those who are struggling for justice.
There were many people in Shymkent who were willing to share their discontent with the European guests. Gulaysha Musiltaeva is the leader of Shymkent indebted mortgages. She explains that they fail to see the real conditions of the banks, and the state supports banks only and not the ordinary people. Why the multi-million debts of the banks were written off? They have borrowed money from the foreigners. Why they don't do the same with us? People talked about the violations of the labor legislation, non-observance of human rights and freedoms. The Shymkent residents have no opportunity to conduct public actions and protests. Several years ago, the city administration has defined 3 places for mass meetings in the outskirts of the city. In course of 2 hours of the meetings, Joe Higgins made notes over non-compliance of Kazakhstan with the OSCE standards.
Kazakhstan continues being listed in world's most infamous indexes. International Freedom House organization states that Kazakhstan is in the list of countries which don't observe the labor rights. Human rights experts have presented the report in Washington, D.C.
Kazakhstan is listed amongst countries where the systematic violations of laborers' rights became a norm. According to the Freedom House International Organization Index, Kazakhstan is on the same level with Afghanistan, Colombia, Venezuela and Iraq at this point. Regular strikes resulted from various labor conflicts in the country speak only about the absence of constructive dialogue between the working class and the government. Any socio-economic meeting easily turns into political protests because they are so actively resisted by the authorities. Even the officials admit the fact of increasing discontent amongst Kazakh workers lately. They say the conflicts mainly occur because of the bad business practice of the private entities who often violate the labor code norms. In Almaty alone, the sum of fines that employers paid to the state budget was more than $170,000, and their debts on salaries make up more than $600 million. If this is not the first pay pause and the money was used for other purposes instead, then the Kazakh Criminal Code Article 48 implies a criminal liability. A trade union activist from Karaganda, Valery Chayka, is protecting the ArcelorMittal Temirtau workers' rights. Those who appeal to the employer with claims are now at the risk of being dismissed. Chayka is confused as the judiciary system is siding with the employer in this situation. Without investigating the situation and involving the trade unions, they simply dismiss. We do our best to restore them back in their positions when they refer to us. There is no system for controlling the government. The situation is getting tense and many public organizations don't lay hope on the government any longer. Current autumn is going to be hot, as political parties and trade unions activists are preparing a series of rallies demanding the government to observe human rights in Kazakhstan.
While the basic rights guaranteed by the constitution are not observed, it seems to gain a status of a sacred document soon. Astana hosted a thematic conference entitled Constitution of Kazakhstan, the base for sustainable development of the state and the society yesterday.
15 years is kind of a conditional term, said the conference participants. The constitution has deep historical roots, which go back to many centuries' history of Kazakh people. Legal experts and politicians sadly state that Kazakh citizens do not practice their constitutional rights. Instead, they are engaged in legal nihilism. Traditionally, conference speakers couldn't help not to outline the role of the president in all the key political processes in the country, including his contribution to creation of the Constitution of Kazakhstan. Officials claimed that the nation's leader significantly assisted in enhancing the document by adjusting some best European traditions of democracy along with totally new elements. Based on the centralized power, President Nazarbayev introduced elements of Western democracy, considering the archetype of Kazakh mentality, and we received a successful structure synthesizing both elements of authoritarian rule and democratic principle.
In the light of strengthening the power of the nation's leader, the freedom of press got suddenly possible in Kazakhstan. President's eldest daughter, Dariga Nazarbayeva, continues getting rid of her media assets. As stated by the leader of the Kazakhstan Today news agency, Timur Kuvatov, the company is now sailing freely. It is yet unclear what the motives were for Dariga getting rid of her shares. Some Kazakh journalists suggest their own vision of the situation.
I believe this is a normal step considering the circumstance. From other hand, it may be difficult to work like this, and at this point the journalists' union decided to assist with finances for some time. It's not about credits, as we are not financial institution or charity organization. We simply lend the money for a certain period. This is not the first case of Dariga Nazarbayeva getting rid of her shares. Just in June, President's daughter had also left the Nurbank board of directors, and prior to that she got rid of the Habar closed joint stock company shares. According to some sources, Dariga Nazarbayeva still has influences on the KTK television channel, Radio Europe Plus and Ruskaya Radio. However, her media empire seems to get down in size. It is still not clear how the editorial policies of Kazakhstan Today news agency will change. Unlike other controlled news agencies, the Kazakhstan Today often used to deliver surprisingly courageous messages, thus making the information arena of the country more lively and diverse. Just recently, the agency got re-registered with the Justice Ministry, said its editor-in-chief. What does this action mean? I don't take it as a gift, I rather consider it as a chance for freedom. Does that mean that Dariga Nazarbayeva takes the agency's non-liquid asset? We are indeed an unprofitable enterprise, so what does anybody think about it?
Followed by a Carton House resident of Almaty, ex-military officer Aynur Surabbergenova threatens to immolate herself along with her daughter. Desperate woman is about to lose her only housing after serving 10 years at the National Guard of Kazakhstan. Local authorities are evicting her out of her room she lives in to a local boarding house.
The Carton House is just the beginning. The warrant officer of Kazakh military forces Aynur Surabbergenova says she, her little daughter and this very housing, which she has been trying to receive through the court for many years, will be burnt down. Aynur had served in the National Guard for 10 years. When she was on maternity leave in 2002, she was dismissed. The court had decided to evict with all the family members from the premise without providing other housing options. Aynur cannot renovate her room in a boarding house for already 7 years due to the lack of money, as her entire salary is spent to raise her little daughter and covering the court expenses. This is terrible. No repair was done. I feel so uncomfortable. Searching for justice, the unmarried mother had referred to General Prosecutor's Office, Defense Ministry and even the President of Kazakhstan. So far, no reaction followed. We may provide housing upon the housing code, and mayor's office can work only within the legal framework. There is no problem if the person is listed in the waiting list, then we are ready to help. Otherwise, I'm afraid there is nothing we can do about it. Military housing scandals are not a rare appearance these days. In 2008, officers without housing even joined in the Military Bombs Union. Through intensive actions, the ironical-sounding organization made the law enforced, and the officers finally received housing. The warrant officer Surappergenova hopes that her story will have the same successful end.
All interest holders of Kazakhstan will receive one apartment each by 2012. This was stated by the Housing Policy Director of the Housing and Utilities and Construction Agency, Kenjibulat Munbayev. The official had explained that this is a generous gesture of the government. Those who are discontent with it are simply inappreciative. The Astana interest holders have been protesting against the state decree which had limited the citizens' estate ownership rights down to one apartment to one individual only. For already 50th day, protesters keep hunger striking. They demand to cancel the infamous decree.
The responsible agency doesn't think that the April resolution of the government that implies one apartment, one owner is unlawful. It was informed today in Astana in course of an online conference by the head of the Department of Housing Policies in the State Agency on Housing and Municipal Committee, Kenjibulat Munbayev. First of all, it is mentioned from the question that these money is the state budget money. This is why when the decree was being accepted back in 2007, in the fourth quarter, there were more than 60,000 interest holders in order to provide them with at least one apartment, even though the state doesn't have to do that. The issue of shared instruction interest holders is one of the most sharp ones in Astana. On September 3rd, it is already the 15th day of the national hunger strike of the interest holders. The protesters were not inspired by the speech of Munbayev. The state says that we're helping you, but we don't need the help. Just give us the money back. Just give us back what you took away. And we ask for the stricter control and justice. We don't need anything else. The shareholders are defending their rights in the so-called Pavlov's Museum. Boris Pavlov has lost more than each of the hunger strikers while fighting for his rights with the administration. Several years ago, his wife has died as a result of a heart attack, fearing to lose the lost shelter. Boris has buried his wife and the hopes to receive justice from the state. The group of racketeers was created on the state level, headed by the administration. They're robbing people. This is my opinion. Boris Pavlov is ready to provide space for the hunger strikers up until the start of the OSCE summit, which is planned for December. He says that he has no regrets, as supports the righteous things.
The detention term for Russian Eurasia logistic company's top managers suspected for embezzling the assets of the BTA Bank is suspended until January 3rd next year. This is despite the recommendation of Russian President to process the cases on economic crimes without preliminary detention of suspects. This all can be explained by the fact that the process is too politicized, say some observers.
The given trial quickly became a target of international media. The criminal defendants are charged with embezzlement of the BTA Bank's assets. The prosecution had stated that one of the major logistics centers of Europe served cover for the illegal activities, although there are some major financial institutions amongst its partners. The Tver District Court of Moscow had decided to keep the suspects under detention until the investigation is completed, despite the business community representatives testified in favor of the defense. Boston University professor Sergei Kulyaev had even collected hundreds of signatures in support of Belov, Volkov, Trofimov and Bondarenko. However, their lawyers weren't able to release them. Unfortunately, we really don't know what is going on with the case because there are all the arguments for releasing him. Moreover, all the amendments recently made to the criminal and procedural code provide all the grounds for releasing him due to the fact that all the incriminated on him charges are based on his business activities only.
This is all for now. Thank you for watching us. Have a good weekend.